Hey guys, SuperHorrorBro Mike here, and in today's video, we take a detailed look at the entire Bendy and the Ink Machine timeline, which has recently been made far clearer by the launch of the new Joey Drew Studios Employee Handbook. If you haven't checked out this book yet, I would certainly recommend it, as it contains a wealth of exciting new information and facts about the inner workings of the studio and the characters who inhabit it. So using this new information, we can expand on older theories and assumptions of how we thought the studio worked as we go through this new timeline year by year to tell the real story of what exactly happened at the studio and when. Our story begins in 1929, when two ambitious dreamers, Joey Drew and his friend Henry Stein, partnered to open an animation studio of their own under Joey's name. Both Joey and Henry had been animators previously, however Henry seemed content to stick to the animation side of things while Joey handled the day-to-day business and was tasked with coming up with new ideas to implement. Bendy was the first creation from the duo. Joey rejecting Henry's initial design and instead going with this more manic looking version. Maybe that was a good move, as Bendy shot to popularity after the smash success of his debut cartoon, Little Devil Darling. Later the same year, Joey and Henry produced another character, everybody's favourite wolf, Boris, in his first film, Sheep Songs. However, while the first year at Joey Drew Studios seemed to be going well financially, behind the scenes, relations weren't so stable.
Only 2 weeks into this company, and already it's gotten interesting. When I agreed to start this whole thing with him, I thought there'd be a little more give and take. Instead, I give, and he takes. I haven't even seen Linda for days now.
Henry was overworked and kept from his family, while Joey seemed content with simply coming up with ideas and counting the money as it poured in from the early success of his new character Bendy. And so somewhere between 1929 and 1931, Henry decided to quit the studio and turn his back on Joey to seek pastures new, leaving his old friend with the following note. Joey, after much thought I've decided that it's time for me to move on from the studio. Let's discuss as soon as you have an opening on your schedule. I hope you'll understand, old friend. Henry. I believe this split happened sometime in late 1930, as in early 1931, Joey announced big plans to hire more workers and expand the studio.
We're growing, knocking out a few walls, putting in a few desks, and collecting the finest talent money can buy.
Joey speaks of knocking down a few walls and putting in some new desks, and Henry comments on exactly that during chapter 1 of the game.
Looks like they knocked out a wall or two after I left. Guess it took a few people to replace me.
So 1931 was the year where Joey started putting some of those Bendy bucks back into the studio to expand for the future and create more cartoons than ever before. In fact, this employee handbook reveals just how many new departments were created and filled with brand new workers. No wonder there was never a shortage of test subjects. This led into the hiring of a new voice for a new character, the character of Alice Angel, created in 1933. However, we have heard the following recording from Alice's actress SUSIE Campbell in 1932.
Sammy, our music director, was also telling me they're working on a new character upstairs. Might require a female touch. I've got a good feeling something great is going to happen.
So it seems casting was completed well in advance of the character's official announcement to the world, which appeared in the Erie Daily Times newspaper. Here, Joey was interviewed and speaks at length about his brand new creation. Before introducing SUSIE Campbell to his staff, Joey first took her out to a lunch where he revealed that the financial situation at the studio wasn't in the best shape. It seems Joey Drew had hired so many workers and expanded his studio so rapidly, he had burned through all the profits Bendy and Boris had brought in from the early days of the studio. Joey's answer to this? Spend more money. In 1934, he launched the Heavenly Toys Workshop, headed up by toymaker Sean Flynn. This new department within the studio launched a line of Bendy, Boris and Alice Angel toys into the homes of kids across America, although it seems perhaps Alice wasn't quite as successful as her two counterparts.
And if he really wants to be so helpful, he could be telling me what I'm to be doing with this warehouse I got full of that angel whatchamacallit. Not a scrap of that mess, me sir.
Moving into 1935, and we see the obscene workload and pressure Henry once faced has started to affect the massive workforce of the studio hired after he left. Joey Drew Studios was not exactly a great work environment. Long hours were requested and with very meagre pay in return. These employees were rarely paid for overtime as Joey worked these crazy hours into the worker contracts. Days off were few and far between, and claiming a sick day was a Herculean task. Joey preferred his workers to use the on-site infirmary so they could be back to their desk and working again within the hour. One must assume this horrendous work environment was born out of Joey's wish to both save money and churn out merchandise and cartoons to keep the studio open after his reckless spending sprees. Joey felt the need to constantly overspend in order to further expand his growing empire, much to the dismay of the studio accountant Grant Cohen.
I'm the guy, see, who has to make sure our budgets don't go all out of whack just because genius upstairs went out and got himself another idea.
We can even see this non-stop crunch in the workplace affecting the mental well-being of Joey's employees. Just listen to music director Sammy Lawrence and his comments in this audio taken from 1935.
Every time I turn around, there's more work to do. 4 cartoons almost complete, and all of them needed tune by tomorrow. A few more months of this, I wouldn't be surprised if that grinning demon drove me completely insane.
For the next 5 years, nothing major seemed to happen, at least nothing we currently know of. Workers kept crunching away, morale was low, and cartoons kept getting made, enough to keep the lights on at least. However, in 1940, Joey Drew came up with a brand new idea. A colossal wonder known as Bendyland, conceived as a theme park full of characters from the Bendy cartoons and attractions based around them. We see evidence of its planning and production during our travels through the research and design department in Chapter 4. In order to successfully pull this new project off, Joey hired an expert in the amusement park business by the name of Bertram Piedmont.
For 40 years, I've built attractions that stagger the imagination. Colossal wonders, such as the world has never seen.
As you can tell, the two creators both had enormous egos, and these clashed frequently, causing a pretty toxic relationship to form between them. Another employee Joey managed to frustrate with his unsympathetic and condescending attitude. In the employee handbook, among the many designs for Bendyland, is this particular image. It shows rejected concept art for the Bendy Park mascot, some of which appeared in terrifying guises as we explored Chapter 4. At the bottom of this image, a note from Joey Drew himself asks, "Can we make it more lifelike?" This is important as it seems to signal a turning point in Joey's mind, a moment where he turned his attention from simply creating a park based around his cartoons to the idea of actually bringing those characters to life. And to do this, he required a machine capable of such a task. Enter the ink machine. While we lack a firm date for the inception of the ink machine, I'd wager it was first built in 1942. This is because we know Thomas Connor started working at the studio in 1943, where he was tasked with the installation of the ink machine, a machine likely conceived and built the year prior, and it sounded like quite the job.
So we're looking at quite the job here. Walls come out, pipes go in, dang walls go back in again. It's like banging your head on a rock over and over and over.
To build and install the ink machine, Joey Drew partnered with the Gent Corporation, an organisation we learn a fair bit about in this new book. Apparently Gent were cheap to hire and had devised a contraption which could pump out ink capable of creating pretty much any object from a template. This contraption was known as the ink maker machine, the little devices we see all over the studio, and these were installed to provide workers with useful tools at a low cost. Simply crank the handle and as if by magic the ink within could create a wrench from a glob of that jet black liquid. Pretty neat. So it was only natural the ink machine would come next, a device of a much bigger scale which Joey secretly planned to use to bring his cartoons into reality. We learn that, as well as working on the maintenance and installation of the ink machine, Thomas Connor was also involved in the top secret experiments Joey carried out in the years thereafter. In this recording from 1943 by studio lyricist Jack FAIN, Connor is spotted speaking with Joey in the depths of the maintenance tunnels.
Speaking of which, I saw Mr. Drew the other day. He was meeting with that Connor fellow holding some papers. Why they want to meet down here is beyond me. Something stinks.
And we know from his recording in Chapter 5 that Thomas Connor was well aware of the secret creation of Bendy too. It seems he reported directly to Mr. Drew and Gent head office and knew far more than most other workers at the studio. With the ink machine now installed, we move into the year 1944, where all of these changes to the studio and investments Joey had been making into future endeavours started to take their toll on the company's books. Too much money was going out and not enough coming in, as Grant Cohen recalls here in this note to Mr. Drew.
Mr. Drew, I really do need to speak with you as soon as possible. Like I said in my last note, we're running $48,128 short this quarter. We won't be able to cover our taxes. I'm fielding daily calls from the IRS looking for our payments. There is not enough money in the accounts right now to cover everything, even if I move some funds around and fudge the numbers. I've also received several sizable bills from Gent, which I'll need to account for, besides the Bendyland payments, which we won't be able to make again this month. Can you please have your girl call down to me when you're next available?
The employee handbook even reveals how workers were not being paid on time, and Grant told them to hold tight while they waited for their delayed paychecks. All the while, Joey stayed in the secrecy of his research department, working on ink machine experimentation in his bid to create a living cartoon. This brings us to 1946, where a scandalous newspaper article was printed revealing many workers had quit Joey Drew Studios and were now sharing their horror stories with the press. Stories of low pay, financial woes, and poor work conditions, all of which Joey denied outright. Joey stated to the press,
"Reports of barricaded offices, employees locked in workspaces, and malfunctioning machinery are just crazy. And about the money, why, we just installed new technology in partnership with the Gent Corporation. We certainly wouldn't have done that if we were going bankrupt. In fact, we're on the verge of taking our business to the next level. I can't wait to show everyone what we have in store with our new cartoons."
The article also states that many new employees were hired at this time to make up the numbers, and we know from the upcoming Dreams Come to Life novel that this was the year when main character Buddy was himself hired, the year he discovered Bendy living in the depths of the studio. So when exactly was Bendy created? Well, we know his failed creation led Joey to begin using human souls as part of his experiments after Bendy was born without one. Joey was afraid that such an abomination would scare away his investors. So this means Bendy was created before Joey convinced Susie to use her soul to bring Alice Angel to life. Another event in the timeline we do not have a concrete date on. With that in mind, this next bit is going to be a bit of guesswork. It seems most probable Bendy was created in either 1945 or 1946, simply because it would be unlikely Joey kept him a secret from the rest of the studio for years on end, and also seems unlikely with workers going missing that others wouldn't be asking questions. So most of the ink experiments on actual humans probably took place in 1946 onward, and I'd imagine the studio went bankrupt soon after, shutting down active experimentation, and the reason why Joey then took the ink machine back to his apartment to continue doing tests thereafter. This is generally where details are still fuzzy, and we'll get a better handle on things with future book launches. It does seem that Allison Pendle joined the studio around 1946 too, replacing Susie Campbell, who became a victim of Joey's ink machine and disappeared from the studio. However, no one asked questions because Joey circulated this letter, essentially explaining to everyone why Susie wouldn't be working as a voiceover there anymore. A clever plan devised to cover his tracks and get a vulnerable woman to be part of his dastardly scheme.
I know how much this part means to you, Susie. Alice means a lot to me, too. I want you to bring Alice to life once again.
And of course we all know the story of Susie by now, so there's no real need to elaborate on it in this video. After the human experiments and creation of Bendy in 1946, the studio continued to lose money and shut down, as we can see on Joey's message board at the end of chapter 5. He went bankrupt sometime in the late 1940s is my best guess here, due to the fact his living cartoons were never perfected enough to be revealed to the public, and so his investors lost faith and he didn't gain a return on all the money lost from his R&D department. After the studio's closure, Joey was invited to the wedding of two former employees in 1952, the marriage of Thomas Connor and Allison Pendle. However, he declined to attend, typical selfish Joey. But we know he kept in touch with this couple, as he managed to lure them back to his studio sometime later to rebirth them into their inky forms, the Alice and Boris seen in chapter 5. Finally, in 1963, Henry himself is invited back to the studio to form the final piece in Joey's plan, reuniting all workers at the studio and finally trying to bring his creations to life via the power of the ink machine. If you wish to see my explanation and interpretation of the ending, check out my Bendy playlist, which has several theories on the subject. But for now, this is where our story ends, with the sad downfall of Henry and his never-ending loop. Back once again at the studio he escaped all those years ago. And that's it for today's video. Please remember to give it a like if you did enjoy watching, and maybe drop a comment too, as well as subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications so you never miss an upload. This channel specializes in variety horror content, including creepypasta readings, horror gaming facts and theories, and general interest pop culture horror videos. So if you're interested in all things spooky, you'll find something to enjoy here at SuperHorrorBro. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next video.